quite mad, actually. There's been loads of PR going on for the film, so I've been travelling all over screenings and Q&As, and it's not been like normal life, that's for sure. But now I'm back in Cornwall today, which is absolute joy to just have a minute. I grew up in a household where there was no music. It was like banned from the house. So it wasn't part of my childhood. So I'd say it's not in my DNA. But then I met my husband to be, and he had an absolute passion for music. So we went to folk festivals and we saw punk bands and everything in between, and that's really where my life with music began. But then, of course, you know, later I met Gigspanner Big Band, and that's why I'll be at Latitude. Yeah. Well, Gigspanner Big Band were formed by Peter Knight. Peter Knight, who used to be part of the incredible Steel Eye Span, and he brought together the trio initially of Roger Flack and Sasha Trochet on percussion. And then they grew into the big band. They were joined by Edgarks, who are this incredible duo from Devon, and then John Spires from Bellowhead fame. And so now they are just this powerhouse of a band who have this immense musical history and wide genres of reference that have created something that's just like nothing else. The idea came from Deborah Knight, Peter Knight's wife, who manages the band, right. And she'd been sent a book by the lady who runs Folk East, the festival in Suffolk, Becky Potter, who said, you've got to read this book. Deborah, of course, who had spent lots of time on the coast path, read the book and thought, there must be so many other stories along this path that have, you know, incredible roots into the musical history of the area. And so they, as a band, they started to gather music and song from the southwest. And then that's when they got in touch with me. And I remember having this message from Deborah saying, we'd be really interested in a collaboration. And I was already a huge fan of Gigspanner, Big Band. And so I can remember running around the house, you know, saying, Mom, you won't guess what? And I was running around the house and then trying to act really cool in the emails back to the band, saying, let's talk about this. Whereas inside I was like, of course I'm going to do it. Well, we had this meeting, and it was in a shed on a farm in Devon. And I was so nervous because I was going to meet this band that you know, were a huge thing to me. They were nervous because they were going to meet me, and I might have said no. But then they came with some of the music that they'd already gathered, and I started to listen to what they were doing and how they were playing it, and I was just blown away by it. I was absolutely blown away by it. But also by the fact that I was in the same room as Peter Knight, who Moth, my husband, and I had been to see when I was about 19. And he played with Steel Eye Span in our local leisure centre. So I was a little bit awestruck, I've got to say. And then, of course, you know, John was there, and I was just kind of speechless, really. But I went away and thought about the music that they brought and my experience on the coast path and everything that I'd seen and witnessed there. And I realised that actually we could put something together that was so rich and so full of context and meaning about the Southwest that it felt like something really powerful was happening. Well, initially we thought maybe I'd do readings from the Salt Path, but for all sorts of boring reasons, we couldn't do that. And then I realised that actually that opened up a huge opportunity to write new prose for the collaboration. And I think from that coast path, my first thoughts would always go to to the actual environment of the path, to the headlands, to that amazing endless horizon of the sea, to the wild biodiversity that is that landscape and the wildlife. That would always be the main thread of anything I was doing about that, about that path. But then the more I thought about it, it was also a path that belonged to the people who'd lived there and do live there now, and all the heritage and history that sits there amongst the stones and the wildlife and the flowers, and that's when it started to weave. We started to feel it like a tapestry growing, and it started to feel the richness of what it could be. But all the time while I was writing it, it was I was hearing all the bits of music that had played in my head while we were walking, all the ridiculous songs that Moth and I had sung around the campfires when we camped on the beaches. But more than that, I think I was hearing the soundtrack to that walk, which was it was the weather, it was the wind, it was the waves against the cliffs, and that's what drove what I was writing, and I think has fed into everything we've done since. We had a rehearsal in a little village hall in Exton, in the Exmouth direction, and we'd all been away and worked on our thing, and then brought it to that day, and we started to put it together. We put the first little bits where the band start, you know, and they're just singing hush hush in the distance, and then the words that I'd started with started to feed in. And I can remember we were all looking at each other, and it was like there was electricity in the room, because some of us were crying, some of us were laughing. We just knew that we caught something that held such a power that we wanted it. We wanted to create from that point on. Yeah, it was that moment. The moment we put the words with the music, we just knew it was going to lift. We were in Taunton for the very first gig, on the seafront in Taunton, and I had never performed live in that way. I'd done book events, but I knew what I was talking about with a book event. I'd never been on a stage and performed something musically like that, and I was absolutely terrified. And I can remember Roger Flack saying, "It doesn't matter what you do, because they don't know what it's supposed to sound like." And I think I've carried those words of Roger's right through every tour we've done since. But we went onto the stage, and immediately it just slotted into place. And it was raw at that stage, and it was early, and it was the very first gig. But by the end of it, the audience were absolutely on their feet, and so carried by what we'd done that we knew that something really quite magical was going to grow from that. Yeah, I mean, writing is such a solitary thing. You're on your own for months and months and months, and you're just in your own head and in your own space. And again, the book goes out there, and you hold your breath because you don't know what the editor's going to say, and then you don't know what the readers are going to think, and you never get any feedback, really, you know, personal feedback, until so far down the line when you go to a book event and you start to feel, you know, whether it's generated any energy or it hasn't. But this is just so different. You go out onto that stage, and within minutes you can see there the response. The immediacy was such a shock to me, because I hadn't felt that before. I hadn't felt that, oh, within a few minutes of getting into this, I can see the response. I can see the movement in the audience. Are they with me? Are they not? And yeah, that was slightly terrifying, I've got to say. Got immediately knowing whether it was there or whether it wasn't. But as the tours have gone by and time has evolved, that's been the wonder of live performance, because you're there with the audience straight away, and it's two-way relationship then, isn't it? Because when they pick it up, you feed from that, and it just grows as it passes through the time. I think they're very, very different experiences. They're like saying, do you prefer eating or drinking? They're so separate.
Both, please. I like both.
I love both, and I can't now manage without both. So it's been quite a revelation to me. Writing, I spend so much time in my own head because it's like painting a picture with words, and I need to visualize the thing I'm trying to write about, and then inhabit the space, and it's so internalized and so alone in that. But it's so intense, really, when you're writing. And then performing's the absolute opposite of that, because you're putting out, so it's absolutely what you put out that is what you're doing. And it's taken me quite a while, well, certainly through that first tour, to really feel and understand the difference between the two. Yeah. And to understand that I need the audience to feel what I feel about those words. It's not just something that I've just created and I'm going to hold that. I need the audience to feel it with me, and that's been such a huge, such a huge transformation, really, from the one to the other, being so separate that now, now I've come to the point where I saw them completely separately, but now, probably 6 or many other tours later, I can see how they've come back together now. Now I feel as if they've rejoined, and we've got something far stronger because of that. There are a couple of points in the second half of the show. Well, actually, there's one in the first half of the first half before the interval. There's a thing where I talk, a piece of prose that I do is called pause, and I talk about before everything there's a pause, a space, a moment, and in that I'm really trying to say, forget what you knew before. This is all going to be different. Everything's different, but at the same time I'm referring back to the past, because all our old life had gone and everything was new, everything. But then after that we feed into a piece of music where everyone interprets a piece of the biodiversity of the path, and it's so transformative. It sort of transports you onto the path, and immediately then we're into that other place, and the audience have joined us there in this other place, and it's as if they're like they've abandoned what they left outside the door and they're there with us then. Yeah. And then in the second half, it sort of builds towards the end, and I do a piece called Home, and I'm really saying the land, the earth, this is our home. And then from that, Hannah Martin sings a piece in Cornish, and it's fantastic. It's so fast, it's so Cornish, so of the place. Yeah. By then I'm on the headlands and there's no getting me off. I do think it is, because we all go to festivals with an open mind, don't we? We don't know what we're going to discover, and we go with an open mind we maybe don't have in ordinary life. So we find things there, and we find something of ourselves that maybe we haven't seen before, and I think that's the wonder of the festival. We played Folk East, and we were in this huge tent, and it filled up with people, and they were jammed into the tent, all these hundreds of people, on this really boiling hot day. And we started this thing that we'd only performed in theatres before, and it was like, so is the tent going to empty? But we got to the interval and they were still there, and they were cramming in from the back, and it was like, okay, this is a festival show as much as it is in the theatres. This is something that speaks to people outside of the normal range of ways of thought of being music separate to words. But it's not, is it? Because all those songs have lyrics, You know, so music and words sit so perfectly. It's just got in our heads, we've separated them out into different things. But as the tours have gone on and the shows have gone on over the couple of years we've been working on Saltlines, the music has now fused with the words in a way that it's hard to separate them. Now the two sit like a tapestry, like the threads in a jumper, so that they don't separate. They belong together now. I have a new book coming out in October. So it's called On Winter Hill, and I'm really excited about people reading this because it's just a further growth of things that I've written about before, but it's also from a really new angle, and I can't wait for people to read that. But then also we have a new project that we're working on. So this summer will be everyone's probably more or less the last chances to see Saltlines,
right,
in a tour we have in July and then Latitude and 2 or 3 dates afterwards. That's time for Saltlines to take a little rest because we're working on a new project. But then we're going to be our first tour with that will be in April next year. So we're all really excited about that because we've had the first rehearsal week and it is fantastic. It is so powerful, so strong. When the words sit with the music on this one, it's going to blow you away.